Lovely, thank you very much, Spencer. Hello everyone. I like to know half of you, so this is just another catch-up and a refresher as to what I've been thinking about for the last couple of years. I'd also like to thank Nicole Hilton and the Maleny Credit Union very much for putting on this event. Well done, people are here and talking about sustainability, which is a really important thing, of course, we know. So today, all I'm going to do is really just enhance and throw some ideas around as to how the future could look. And I'm also going to do a bit of a refresher as to how people work, and it's really important to remember that we are social animals. That's why we're feeling good about being here today. So let's get through 60 slides in 30 minutes. Let's begin. I would first like to acknowledge, of course, the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and future and emerging. This is really important to note and to also hold space for, because culturally our Indigenous and so many other cultures that are not Western have holistic values that we're now becoming conscious of again in our society. That could be the way forward, the future for us to learn. So it's not just about reconciliation, it's about unification, but also listening and learning what our delightful Indigenous cultures all around the world, including Australia, can offer in helping make the future and the planet great for everyone. And Indigenous elders are talking to me about that. That's what they say, and I love them for that. So let's not overlook our local people. It's similar to Ubuntu in Africa. Kanyini is one name given to a holistic system that our Indigenous connect people, the land, the ocean, the sea, the waters, and how to look after the land. And this is an approach that in the West we're starting to realise we really need to start embracing this stuff sooner than later. So there's so much there, so rich. I was also at the Woodford Folk Festival a couple of years ago. Some of you might know about it. And I heard an Indigenous thought leader say, I don't know who it was, it could have been Wurrunga, I don't know. But they said, we don't need to own land. And I was like, light bulb moment. We only had land ownership probably in the last 1,000 years or so. Before that it was a commons. Feudal England was a commons as well. And the problem with land ownership is that people feel entitled, and that's how kind of wars start in conflict. This is my land, don't do anything with it. But when we own land, we're actually part of an ecosystem overall. If you own a piece of a farm in a valley, the water falls on your land and it goes to another piece of land and it forms an ecosystem with a creek and a river, and it keeps that whole biosphere healthy. We need to have a more holistic understanding and embracing and how we run land and people as well. It's not just the animals, it's also us. So this sort of thinking again is more Indigenous, and I think we need to walk this way to guarantee more sustainability in the future. So here is me. I think some of you heard the story before. I've worked for top media agencies. I helped bring about this stuff called electronic dance music, the stuff that goes dum, 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 dum. So I apologise to some of you. But it was an important change to happen, because it wasn't just about music, it was about generational change. It was about breaking down stereotypes with people of other cultures who are of different gender. Our electronic dance music scene actually had values of tolerance and inclusion, which I loved, because I didn't grow up with that when I was a kid in the 70s. So I'm into social change, which is beneficial for all people. And I might use tiny houses or music to help bring that about, but they're tools to help change the world in a way that wishes to for the better. And that's where I come in, being a behavioural change agent. I probably describe myself as that more than anything else. Some people call me the tiny house guy. I thank them. I used to work for these media outlets. They're not evil. I had a lot of... I was paid to bring about social change. It was unbelievable, but I did it very well. I worked for Nova, Wild FM we set up, Channel D on Foxtel. Also major radio networks like the Austereo Network, Central Station Records, so on and so forth. We set up some brands. 4Play was a dance brand. I worked in bulletin boards and computer systems before all this. So I've always been involved in progressive change. Where is society going? We'd like to help society get there. And right now, to me, sustainability and community are the two big ones, which we probably will be dealing with for several decades to come, hopefully, if we get there. So very quickly, I am, of course, this is polkadot. It's a collaboration of 3 people, and our mission, like as was introduced in the talk before, or Spencer said, is to demonstrate the principles of sustainability and community living to the mainstream in an accessible and engaging way so that the planet can be enjoyed for generations to come. That's absolutely our mission. And so we are really interested to work with those people who are serious about reaching the broader population. So if you're into that, come and see me anytime. I'm on Facebook as well, just look for Jimmy Z. That used to be my radio name. So that's what polkadot is all about. We don't invent the ideas, we broadcast and amplify them so more people can do them. Of course, climate change is a big issue. Nothing more needs to be said. I don't think we have too many deniers in here. But, you know, everyone's free to have an opinion. But we do have some problems. The 4 problems that in this talk I wish to solve today, or at least provide some ideas as to how we can address them. Of course, affordability for housing is really, really important. That's affecting all of us. Sustainability is the big one. Aging, this is really important. We do live in an aging population. The Sunshine Coast has a very high, older end of town population as well. And as we ourselves are becoming older, like Claire from the Eco Villages Australia across the road, young as she is, she's also thinking about this, is that it does get a little bit harder to live. We need to bring the community thing back into our society. Kids don't need to go off to dance parties, which is what I used to do. They need to also be involved in a credible, authentic and cool way with different age people in their community. In the West, we love to segment people and go, you're young, go and party. You're old, sit in a nursing home. It's not very sustainable, it's not very enjoyable, it's quite disconnected. So we wish to try and do things about that. Disconnection, of course, is the symptom of all of these things. So there's no conspiracy theory nonsense in all this talk, I hope. It's very secular what I'm talking about. There is spiritualism involved here as well, but it's ultimately about people feeling happy within themselves. We can do a lot to improve that with our current society, but where we've got to now, awesome. But we do need to change our heading. So housing affordability, big issue. I won't dwell too much on this because we all know about it. One of the big problems, of course, with the current market is that while our wages have gone up somewhat, housing prices have gone up way a lot. And it's a pyramid. It's not a good system for sustainability, but it's great when the market is blooming. And this is the big problem, it's putting more and more people at the bottom end of town having to rent. There was a day when a lady could work at a bakery, she could save for her own house within about 20 or 30 years easily. That lady in this current age and day can no longer do that. There's no need for that. But the economists have let her down. And as a result, so many of her are now having to resort to living in places they don't want to live, in housing commission rentals they don't really suit. Many, I think several hundred ladies are living in cars on the Sunshine Coast. And this is people who've made such a contribution to our society are just being put on the edges and pushed out. We have Chasm here, of course, Compassionate Housing Affordability Solutions Maleny. That's come about for a need to help that particular group of people. I think we can do this better, and these people have so much wisdom and love. I would like to see us putting that to work to help regenerate a more sustainable society in mainstream culture, not just in eco-villages. This is really important. So that's one of the problems with our lovely property thing. Again, what happens when people cannot afford to live? Well, sorry to bring up the bad headlines, but my forefathers were involved in one of these purges, the Huguenots in France, back in the 1600s and 1700s. They actually did very well. They worked the system to what it was, and they ended up with all the wealth. Then the Catholics came through, cut their heads off, and we had to go and live in other places. We weren't being evil people. We were just doing what we were told and using the system to what it was designed to do, which is to whatever. But we don't feel that this is the right way to go. We would love to think we could learn from our mistakes in the past. I don't wish to own land. I don't want to see a repeat of this in the future. So these are really important things to think about. It will happen again. Again, I won't dwell on this too much. One of our banks, I can't fathom this, but I know that a lot of you are stuck in this mortgage thing. But mortgage, if you actually look at the definition of mortgage, mort means death, and The term comes from Old French and Latin. Before that, it literally means death pledge. This is what we're entering into. Now, it's worked to a degree. If we keep net migration huge and up, and keep people having babies, it'll keep going. But the point where it doesn't become sustainable because the environment's suffering, it then kind of collapses. So we're kind of sleepwalking into disaster here right now. And that last slide, the French Revolution, that is what happened. So we need to start thinking, if we want to repeat history, just keep doing the same thing. We need to be smarter about how we organise our system. Again, no one's evil in the whole system. The economists perhaps are asleep at the wheel and not going to do anything about it, but we can do something about this, and no one has to lose, because I think there's benefits to everybody, rich or poor. If we build community back into our society, we can actually bring about much greater benefits and increase life expectancy, because people are happier and more content. Very important. So, the cost of housing, very simple slides. You can buy a dwelling on the Sunshine Coast, this was a year ago, $415,000 for something at sea level. But then you can build this tiny house. This is for sale right now. You can actually buy this tiny house. It's a great one. $87,000. I mean, I haven't got $500,000 to waste. I think I know where my choice is. I'll leave that with you to consider. Now, going back to talking about, that's interesting, that animation. Going back to my family. So my father worked in the public service, paid off a mortgage, owned his house when he retired, and then he died 7 years later. He became a hermit inside his own house. We couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. He had all the tests from the doctors under the sun. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. And so I started doing some thinking, well, if it's not physical, what could it be? And I figured out it was mental. He became disconnected. Because he was disconnected, he was isolated, he wasn't getting those endorphin hits from being a person with interaction with people around him. Therefore, he became depressed, he became anxious, and then became fatigued. And I think it's a common story that gets played out in all of our lives. It affects all of us because of the way we live as like caged animals. You know, I've lived in apartment buildings and never felt so isolated. We can sleep 30 feet away from somebody else in an apartment and not know who they are and what they do, not be there for them. They got to just get on with their life and, you know, wish you the best of luck, go get a job. Not ideal. So it got me thinking. There's my family there, there's my father, there's an embarrassing shot of me when I was a kid, my beautiful mother. We were the nuclear family, we were doing everything we were told. And my parents divorced when I was 9, we went to Canada to live, and they both died of heart attacks, of a broken heart. I think it's a very suitable metaphor. So, this is something I figured out as I was growing up. No one told me any of this stuff. I'm seeing the potential that if we could build communities more in a way that you have different generations and different cultures, of course, as well, is very important. Is that in Denmark, for example, they have co-housing villages. We have people from Smart Living here. I think Max is standing over there. And they are working on very much the same thing. Co-housing, where a single parent family can mutually share the care of their children with the care of the elderly. I mean, how efficient is that? You don't need to fund that. That just happens. That's how inefficient our societies become. And so it is possible, I believe, to establish trust between strangers. If you do have your phone and you're interested in what I'm talking about, you're welcome to take pictures of these slides. The camera at the top says this is a good one to take a picture of. But I do recommend this one if you go home and you're looking for something to fall asleep to. It's only 10 minutes long, co-housing at its best. Erica Elliott. If you take a picture of that screen, go home and watch that. An amazing talk, which really paints the picture as to why co-housing and community living is so important that we must aim for. And it has a delightful story of an elderly lady who passed away in her community. They're all strangers, but they became family. And she actually had her funeral before she passed, because she said she's not leaving without partying. She's not going to miss her funeral. So they had a party for her, a funeral service, and then she passed away a few weeks later. And what a beautiful way to live. But we can't do that in nursing homes, and we can't do that alone in our houses. So I think those are the benefits that we should start aiming for in terms of community living. All right, so some very basic things. What is a tiny house? Of course, it's a description from the architectural and social movement that advocates simply living in smaller homes. I think you've all seen them before. We love tiny houses on wheels. We're quite prejudiced with those things. A granny flat's nice, but on wheels is amazing. And if you don't want to move, you just stop moving. Very simple. Now, this is talk about tiny housing and eco-villages. What is an eco-village? This is important. An intentional or traditional community is an eco-village with local participatory processes to holistically integrate ecological, economic, social and cultural dimensions of sustainability in order to regenerate social and natural environments. We had people from Gen out here recently. We did an event at the Maleny Community Centre where we flew out Kosha Anu-Joubert from the Global Eco-Village Network and Robin Alfred from the Findhorn Foundation, which is regarded as one of the most popular and progressive eco-villages that's helping to bring about change around the world. Now we're here in Maleny. These things are really important to note. And as of last Monday, I'm now actually living in a tiny house, mine, in an eco-village. So I'm really happy for that. Hold your applause. Thank you. So these two movies here, I saw at the end of a career where I was in the music industry for a couple of decades. I highly recommend, again, please take a picture of this, because if you ever get a dull moment, go and download and watch these movies. They're very easy to watch, they're joyful to watch, and they will teach us or remind us what it is to be human and what it is to be happy, and also what it is to be yourself. It tells us how we work as human beings. Now, in these movies, I learned some things about people, but before I go to that, this is a copy or a picture of Findhorn Foundation. These are pictures of a stonemason's house. An Australian called Craig Gibson played a didgeridoo in a hut in Findhorn in Scotland. It's in Scotland, England. And then, of course, that's their main building there. This is a sewage treatment plant with a living system. And this is Craig Gibson right here, an Australian who's now retired in Scotland. And his permaculture garden, which is quite random and gets the ire of the locals living there. He has chickens running amok, but it works. It's delightful, it's random, he doesn't spend too much time on it, and he just picks food as he needs it. These, I think, are the ways that are cues to the future as to how we can live better. Of course, I also visited Christiania. It's an awesome eco-village in Denmark. It was taken over by a bunch of hippies in the 70s. It was a military barracks, which was used to defend Denmark against the Swedes. It's now just bought a piece of land officially from the Danish government, and they got a loan for $30 million, so good luck paying that off, but they get to retain their lovely social experiment in the Western world. So if you do go overseas, I highly recommend a visit. It's quite colourful. The reason why I like Christiania is because they make fun. That's a dumpster, that's a tiny house painted as a rainbow. They also tolerate people who like to smoke a little bit. That has changed a little bit since the time I visited it. But it is an open society. It's a delightful place to visit. It's also an eco-village to some degree, or an intentional community. Now, one thing I did learn is that not all eco-villages work. They can be mired in conflict, entitlement, and fight. Now, that's not their problem. It's not their fault. It's because of the Western living paradigm. It's because we're Westerners. We don't know how to live in community. We've forgotten. It's been several generations since we actually lived in feudal England or feudal Europe, or it could have been a tribe in Africa, or wherever you come from. We have lost our sense of living in community. That's why we're now living in individual boxes. We don't trust each other as well. That's a big factor. So I have set about to try and figure out what it is that is the blocks. How can we solve this issue? Again, something that Andrew McLean brought to my attention, this lady, Diana Leaf Christian, he's from Eco Villages Australia, is that 90% of eco-villages never get off the ground. Their vision communities never get built. They can't find the right land, they don't have the right money or enough of it. They can get mired in conflict. They simply don't understand sometimes how much time, money and organisational skills required to pull off a project of this scope. It's very, very hard to do it as an individual. It's holistic, it's so many things. So we appeal to people wishing to work in this area to work collaboratively, because that is where the success lies. And that's an element of a community, is to work together. It's not easy. Something very good, I've got a quote from a gentleman at the Queensland Camping and Conference Centre. Those who build community, kill community. But those people who love people, build community. Now that's not having a go at any particular type of person. It's actually like a Shakespearean thing. It's within all of us. If we try to construct a community and get people to live together, it may not work. But if we start from a heart intention of loving people, being compassionate and empathetic. That, I believe, is the key to actually how to build an eco-village. The buildings are probably the last consideration, the solar, the permaculture. Very easy to do, it's just engineering. It's the heart intention that actually builds a community. If you are building a community, find your people, get them together first. Don't try and start building stuff. You've got to get your people together because you need to trust that it's actually going to follow through. Just a tip. So, this is what I've been talking about, the Western living paradigm. We live in a society which promotes entitlement, individualism, competition, egocentrism, because of our music scene. Miley Cyrus, all the American pop stars, it's always about me, me, me. Facebook doesn't help. It's a wealth and greed. You know, greed is good. That movie back in the 80s. That's the worst side of it. And that is the glass ceiling that I believe gets in the way of eco-villages prospering in our world. Because of all this, because that doesn't build community. To build community, we need to have community, a sense of sharing, collaboration, compassion, and respect. That is what builds community. And this slide is doing its own animation, which is great. Anyway, the whole point is that this thing falls apart. It's meant to, we have an attitudinal change or shift that we require to actually be able to build communities back to the way that we used to live, that we've actually evolved as people. And this is slowly dissolving away. Hello. I know. Hello, Francis. How are you? You're from Castle. Beautiful. That's a very important thing. Okay, we'll move on. Now, one of my little theories here is that community is inversely proportional to something called addiction. So the bigger or better your community, not bigger, but better quality your community, the less incidents there will be of addiction. Addiction replaces meaningful social contact. That's how we've evolved as animals, as people, both. We get hits of endorphin when we do something good with each other. We're all feeling good right now, talking, listening, relating to each other. We've got a common interest and goal. That's the opiate of being human. When you don't have that, it goes to addiction. That's the reason why we have alcohol bans called Dan Murphy's and First Choice. The reason why drugs are becoming always a constant problem. You don't fight the war on drugs by just removing the drug dealers. They're just providing a service and facility. You actually have to rebuild community and a sense of value to all the people within it and a sense of meaning for those people as well, even a sense of vision. So always think, when you see a community that's not functioning, you'll probably see addiction. Drugs, alcohol, marijuana will be used a lot to make up the fact that people don't have meaningful contact. That's how it works. That's how we break it down. You want to fix the problem, you've got to understand what the problem actually is. So we're going to start at the very beginning, how people work. I've kind of been talking about this a little bit throughout my whole talk. You've got to remember that we are social animals. That's number one. In the movie I Am and the Happy movie, they did touch upon this experiment which was done in the 70s. It was called Rat Park. It deals with addiction and connection. And what they did was they had two cages. There was one cage full of rats who had light, food, they could hang out with each other, make love, the whole lot. And then they had an isolated rat they stuck in a single cage. So there's two cages you can envisage. And in both cages they had 2 bottles of water. One of them was just plain water, and the other one had effectively heroin in it. Now the water bottles are drank from differently in both cages. Would anyone like to guess, in the water with this rat here, which is on its own, there's the heroin water and there's the normal water, which water would it have drunk from the most? Anyone like to hazard a guess? Interaction? Francis? Heroin, correct. I don't know if the prize will, there's not much of a prize, but dignity. So it actually drank a lot from the heroin, and it actually drank the heroin water till it died. That's what happened. In the Happy Land, or Rat Park, they drank the normal water, and they didn't really want that water. They weren't told what it was. So you can get your head around the fact that rats, like us, are social animals. Similarities, a lot of animals are social. Social makes us successful. But when the rat just didn't have social company, it needed to top up its opiates, and eventually it just died of heroin addiction. And of course, we see this in our own society. It happens in Maleny, it happens in Nambour, it happens all over the Sunshine Coast, it happens all over the world. It actually happens all over the Western world in a very big way. I don't hear about islanders in the Pacific and Oceania dying of drug addiction. They have other problems. In Africa, you don't hear about drug addiction so much. You hear about polio, ethnic cleansing, riots, and all that sort of thing. But they don't die of drug addiction so much because they have community, they have a sense of connection. It's the Western world that's got this all wrong. We're living in it. So then I thought to myself, well, how are we going to fix this problem? We need to find things that work. So I started thinking about what communities actually work in the Western world. Of course, we're familiar with Woodfordia, or Woodford, the Maleny Music Festival, of course, too. We also have the Blues Fest, and I attended this little event in the Nevada desert in America called Burning Man. Has anyone heard of Burning Man, the Burning Man Festival? Cool, we're in some cool company here. Don't feel left out if you didn't. It's an amazing festival. For 3 weeks, people turn up to a desert location, create community, and have an amazing time. They don't exchange money, they have a gifting economy. It's amazing. If you look it up on YouTube, you'll see some cool videos about it. And that is a community that works. So if we can get a community like that to work for 3 weeks in the Western world, surely we're going to have a bash, something that lasts years and be sustainable. So that's what we're getting to right now. So I envisage the future of being a potential where, imagine we had national parks for people worth saving. Like caravan parks, but with added layers, of course, of permaculture and agroforestry, community meals, facilities and events, renewable resources and shared utilities like solar power, for example, solar power charging stations. These are already happening in eco-villages around the world. Lebensgarten, which is an eco-village in Germany that I visited, they had a few electric cars. Fintorn had a number of electric cars. They shared the cars, they didn't all have to own a car. They all went into a syndicate where they put in so many quid each. And out of the 4 or 5 cars between 30 people, there was always a car available. So they save money, save the environment. In our society, down a cul-de-sac, you can't get a car park anymore because everyone has to own, every household has like 2 to 3 cars. You don't even need 1 car for a household. If you had 5 to share at the cul-de-sac, you probably have enough cars to look after everybody. Okay, maybe a couple more, but not too many more. Socially engineered is really important. Hard intention, that's the biggest thing. Without that, no point having it. You're just going to have a bunch of people living together that will fight. And you don't want that, because we have seen that in eco-villages, of course, around even this area. Reputation, smart contracts, technology will play a very key role in helping build this consensus-led society or governance. It's like the internet of money in governance. If I told you back in the 90s that the internet was coming, you would have went, what is that? I don't understand it. But now in 2019, we're all using it. That's how we found out about this event. Blockchain, holochain, and technologies that can use a supercomputer in your phone, in your hand, will play a tremendous role, 5 times bigger impact than the internet's had on your life already. And I would challenge anyone to say the internet's had no impact on their life. So this is big stuff. The technologists are working through the bugs, they're trying to figure out how they're going to do it, but this is the new world we're walking into. There's a lot of programmers, who I call our modern day philosophers, who are working to try and help solve these problems that I'm talking about in this talk, and that can be done through apps. I also have these ideas that eco-villages could be a little bit more informal and fun as well, because people like to have fun. You've got to connect with the inner child. It can't be all just serious. A lot of eco-villages are set up to just be eco, but if they're not set up socially, they kind of can fail, and they do. So we need to put a little bit more charisma and more fun into eco-villages. So rather than having lots and lots of rules and principles and guidelines and da-da-da-da-da-da, I love the music industry, which I used to work in. You'd have bands that, have anyone heard of Pink Floyd? Yeah, like no one's not heard of Pink Floyd here, right? Pink Floyd, Beyonce is an R&B artist, and one of my favourites was Skrillex when I was a DJ. He plays dubstep. But within a rock band, they all have a following. There's a band called the Grateful Dead in America that was pointed out to me recently. They have a group of followers called the Deadheads that would follow them from concert to concert. That was a travelling community. Not a sustainable community, but it was a community nonetheless, of people with aligned values, vision and goals. I'm getting to wrap up. So I believe that how rock bands have followings could be a way that eco-villages could be run in the future, but they will make the effort to be somewhere that people want to be, and they'll have their own code, their own values, which are intrinsically embedded into their culture. This is Burning Man. 3 weeks, people get together, they just have 10 principles, and that's it. The law of the land applies, and that's how simple it is. It can't be much simpler than that. That's as much as they need to function as a society. At Currumbin, the eco-village, this is one of their family shots. And again, it's a good thing to remember. It does take a village to raise a child, but it can be a nightmare for a single mother to raise a child, or 2 at least. So we need to change that up, because there's a lot of older people around who probably like kids and could help become valued and a part of their lives. So I'm seeing a future for perhaps tiny house villages. I don't have time to talk about it a lot today, but that's Burning Man, that's the Blues Festival, and this is a tiny house village. Let's move on. And I also believe that the tiny houses on wheels are really important because it's mobile housing. I believe it takes time for people to find their tribe. So it's very hard to just buy a piece of land and sit there and go, that's where I'll be forever. Your community will come and go. You might end up moving in with a toxic neighbour beside you. That could create cancer. So I think mobility in housing is important. Now, not everybody wants to move around, but I think we do need to be able to give more liquidity to our housing. And I think technology like that telephone, those apps that we can run on them, will help be the key to that. But we're not there yet. We're still waiting for people to get there. Tiny houses on wheels, I just say it's like a caravan, but it's built like a house. Again, I'm now living in our built tiny house, and I'm loving it. It's actually bigger than what my needs are. It's the size of a large luxury caravan. But the thing is, wherever I go, I can take my house with me. Beautiful. There are some bullet points. We won't spend too much time on that. You can take a picture of that if you really want to. But I won't sit here and chime on the values as to why tiny houses on wheels are significant. I can sit here and talk forever about the future of tiny houses, but just to get a tiny house on wheels and appreciation as to why they're a good thing is probably enough for us to look at today. So that is where I shall conclude my talk, Spencer, wherever Spencer is.